As far as the reference material is concerned, I'm going to be doing a self-portrait just from a photo because it's easy to show you people how to do it yourself. Just with the reference material, what I suggest to people is when choosing a portrait, the reason why we're starting with portraits is because if it's wrong, you can see. If you paint a tree, you can paint a tree in 1,000 different ways. It'll still look like a tree. But with a portrait, if your one eye is slightly crooked or the nose is slightly in the wrong place, you can see, and that's also why people do life drawing. So, because if the arm's slightly too long or the hand's slightly too big, you can see. It teaches you to draw properly. And yet for that reason, it is also a little more difficult. But when choosing a portrait, just two things to consider. Just having your features quite clear. So when you're looking at your features in a portrait, you've just got to see how much information is there about that eye, how much information is there about that nose, because when it's a little snapshot, a little blur, there's very little information about that feature on the face, which makes it difficult to paint or draw properly. The second thing is I do suggest that you use a portrait that has a lot of contrast in shading, light and shade on the face. This is because it just makes for a far more interesting painting or, well, image. And it also breaks down the face, making it easier to paint or draw. Whereas the fashion photography, for example, the faces tend to be a lot flatter with very little range between the light and dark, making it a bit less interesting. Just with regards to drawing, basically there's a few things one needs to learn, and it doesn't take what people think it takes to be able to paint and draw. Anyone can learn as long as they're interested in the process and having a reasonable ability to concentrate. One of the first things we're going to tackle, which is one of the fundamental basics of painting or drawing, is shape training. So training your mind to start seeing shapes. Now in life, we never look at shapes. We never look at something and try and work out what shape it is. So our brains aren't very wired up to see these shapes, and there's very, very many aspects to what shape it is. So we are going to tackle that. There is basically in painting and drawing no such thing as what an eye is, or what a nose is, or what a head is. There's only what shape is it, how light or dark is that shape, and is it a soft or sharp edge. So if one can get that correct, you would be able to paint and draw virtually anything. So basically when we walk around, the mind has a judgment about everything. So when you see a tree, it likes to say, oh, there's a tree, what do I think of it? If there's a car, you like to say, oh, there's a car, what do I think about it? The brain likes to interpret everything. But with painting and drawing, you basically slowing down your mind to be able to see the simplicity of what you're looking at, which is basically, there's a shape. How light or dark is that shape? Is it a soft or sharp edge? So it is a type of meditation, painting and drawing, and it can take you into an altered space. By the same token, it's the same with meditation. The brain doesn't like it very much and often tries to give you 1,000 distractions as to why, do the washing, clean the car, as soon as you try and settle down to do some painting. So we will be doing our painting mostly upside down. just so that we can start to see, you know, the shapes properly and the tones properly. So let's get started. We're going to go through many drawing tools in the process of doing this painting. The first drawing tool we're going to cover is just the grid, which is very basic. The grid is used for two reasons. Number one, to just get your basic drawing onto your canvas, especially good for beginners. And number two, the grid is very useful for training your mind to see shapes. So let's go. So we're going to start by just putting a square around your image. It has to be a square, meaning obviously both sides are equal. One can use a rectangle, but the level of mathematics needed to make sure that the relativity of the one side is relative to the other side on your canvas as well is a little bit complex. So it's much easier just using a square. Here we go. Okay, so we'll just start by halving the square, cutting it in half. So we just halve the square and halve the square again, quarter the square. So when your picture is a rectangle rather than a square, all we do, once we've divided these segments, we just take a segment, whatever this size is, and we put another segment over there. Now it is very important when initially first doing your square to use an easy number, a rounded off number. So for example, like using 20 rather than 18.90, because otherwise your segments will never be equal. When there's a segment that has a lot of detail in it, you can divide that segment again. So this is for people who are beginning. What is suggested is that you actually break your image down into puzzle pieces like this. This will help your mind to see everything as shapes. And remember, the negative shape, which is the shape on the background, is easier to see than the foreground shape. So we've broken the face down into puzzle pieces, just to get the mind used to seeing things as shapes, and we can see how one shape fits into the next shape and relates to the next shape. So this is just one of many drawing tools we'll be covering. Most of the other drawing tools we'll be going over in the third layer of the painting. Now we're just going to transfer the grid onto the canvas. Now as you can see, this is a square canvas. This is now a rectangle. There's many options. Either I can just paint the square section, or alternatively leave some space on both sides. That's what I think I'll do. So the first thing to do is simply to chuck the square onto the canvas. So basically I've just chucked a square down, any size, doesn't matter too much. Again, just using easy numbers, rounded off numbers. So in this case 30 centimeters across, just halving it again by itself and halving it again by itself. Now on the canvas I am using a watercolor pencil, because watercolor pencil dissolves with water, and if there's a mistake made, you can literally just wipe it off with a damp cloth rather than rubbing it out. Pencil tends to dirty the canvas and also be harder to remove. So I just added the last 2 bits. Now I'll just halve these again as I've done on the picture. Also, if you don't want to ruin your picture like this, you can just put plastic over your picture and use a permanent marker to mark the grids on the top of the image, of photograph or image. Just adding another section onto the bottom again, because this image is a rectangle, not a square. Hi guys, so we're just going to draw in these basic shapes onto the canvas. Now we're not doing a drawing, so we're keeping the details to a minimum, and also in the third layer of the painting we will I'll add a lot more drawing tools to the situation. Just remembering it's about how all the different shapes relate to each other. Also training your mind to start seeing the angles of shapes and the relationship between the different shapes, and remembering of course the negative shapes are much easier to see than the positive shapes. So just starting with that right now. So there's something called the 3-second rule, and that is if you are looking for your drawing for more than 3 seconds, or your painting, when you have reference material, then you're making it up out of your head. So now I've just put down some of the absolute basic shapes of the face, remembering that the base layer of painting is very vague anyway, so we don't want to put too much detail down. I'm just going to take a damp cloth or a wet wipe and just wipe off the grid now, at least just to some degree, so that we don't have lines underneath our painting. We don't have to get it all off.